Let's talk about relationships. A relationship is nothing but association among entities. What is the relationship between two entities? That is going to be decided by the relationship, right? So how do we get whether we have to put a relationship or not? Again, from the description, right? So in the requirement analysis phase, we are going to get the verbal description. In the description, wherever you find a verb, that is going to be translated as a relationship, right? Let us say while you have collected this requirements, let us say that user said that an employee works for an department. Now employee is a entity and department is an entity, and works for is a relationship, right? Let's take an example and see how it looks like. Say this is the entity set and this is the department set. This is the employee entity, okay, and this is the department, right? Employee entity type and department entity type. This is the employee set and this is the department set. Now they said that in the verbal description, let us say the requirement analysis is like this. In the requirement analysis phase, they clearly mentioned that every employee works for a department, okay, and a department can have many employees, right? And let us say one more constraint is new department need not have any employee, right? If this is what you have written down, which means in your conversation with the users as a database designer, when you are collecting the requirements, you have jotted them down, and they said that every employee has to work for definitely one department and exactly one department, okay? Every employee works for exactly one department, which means he cannot work for more than one department, exactly one department. And a department can have many employees, and a newly formed department, it need not have any employees, right? Then how are you going to have the relationship? So choose a meaningful name, right? So since I am writing the employee here and I am writing the department here, right, writing works for makes sense, that's it. That is the meaning of the name, right? So now an employee works for the department. If I would have written department here and employee here, then what I'll write is a department employees and employee, right? So name you can choose it depending on the placement. It has to be meaningful, that's it. There is no hard and fast rule. You can even have some name for here like A, B, C, but it doesn't make sense. You have to make the ER diagrams as readable as possible. Whoever, even the naive user sees it, he should be able to understand what you are trying to do, okay? Now let us say we have employees like this: E1, E2, E3, E4, E5, E6, right? Let me represent using these dots. These dots represent, each dot represents an employee, right? And let us say we have various departments, D1, D2, D3, like this, okay? 3 departments. Now every relationship here in this relationship type, this is relationship type, this is employee type, and this is the department type, right? So every relationship in the relationship type is actually an association between employee and department, right? So how is it? If employee E1 works for department D1, then we are going to join these two in this relationship type, in this relationship, got it? Therefore this relationship is a combination of one entity from here and other entity from here, got it? And what about this one? Let us say employee E2 also works for department D1, then employee E2 and department D1 will be combined here, right? Which means this relationship is actually a combination or association of one entity from here and one entity from here. Let us assume that E3 is also working for department D1. Then one more relationship will be formed by taking one entity from here and one entity from here, right? In the same way, if these three are working for D2, then I am combining them, right? So every relationship is formed by taking two entities. Understood this? Let us say he is also working for D2 itself. Now we are going to talk about some few things, some few characteristics of the relationship. So now works for is a relationship. So one characteristic is degree. So degree is nothing but in every relationship, right, how many entity sets are participating. So one entity set is employee and other entity set is department. So in this relationship we are having two entities participating, right? That is why this relationship is also called as binary relationship, binary, right? And the degree is 2. So degree of this relationship is 2, right? And there are various other things. One is called as cardinality ratio. Cardinality ratio. See, coming to this cardinality term, it is not actually the same term as set theory cardinality. Actually, cardinality is the number of elements in a set, isn't it? But here, when I talk about ER diagrams, the term cardinality ratio denotes what is the maximum number of relationships in which an entity can participate. Again, cardinality ratio says what is the maximum number of relationships in which an entity can participate. For example, if you look at this E1, right, he can participate only in one relationship and he is not participating in any of the relationship, isn't it? Therefore, what is the cardinality of employee? The cardinality of employee is 1, isn't it? Because every entity in employee is participating only in one relationship, right? And what about the cardinality of department? See this, every department is participating in more than one relationship, isn't it? Therefore, whenever one department or one entity participates in many relationships, it is many, right? Therefore, we use M or N to denote it. Therefore, cardinality of employee is 1 and cardinality of department is N. Got it? And one more thing is participation. Participation or existence. Participation or existence constraint. So these two are called as structural constraints. Structural constraints. Okay. Now what is participation is minimum. So when cardinality says what is the maximum number of relationships an entity can participate, this participation says what is the minimum number of relationships a entity can participate. Sometimes this participation is also called as minimum cardinality. Cardinality is nothing but maximum, and sometimes when it is also referred to as minimum cardinality because it discusses about how many minimum relationships a entity can participate, right? Now if you watch this, in this one, what is the minimum number of relationships in which each entity can participate? Each entity has to participate in at least one, isn't it? Therefore minimum is 1, right? And what about this one? The minimum number of entities in which it can participate is actually 0. The reason is, if you look at this newly formed department D3, it is not participating in any of the relationships. Therefore participation is 0. Are you understanding this? So the degree of this relationship is 2 because in this relationship two entities are involved, and then cardinality is the maximum number of relationships an entity can be present. So the maximum number of relationships, that depends on the type of verbal specification. See, how did we derive this? We derived this everything from the verbal specification of the this requirement analysis. They said that every employee has to participate in exactly one, has to work for at least one and exactly one department. That is why the cardinality of E1 is 1. I mean, this employee is 1, right? And what about the cardinality of this one? They said that a department can have many employees. Therefore, the maximum number of relationships this can participate is n. Got it? And now what about the minimum? That depends on whether they are participating at all or not, right? If you look at this, we have a constraint saying that at least every employee has to work for at least one department, or he has to work for exactly one department, which means there should not exist any employee who is not working with any department, right? That is why it is also sometimes called as existence constraint, which means the employee is having a constraint of existence. He cannot exist if he doesn't work for a department, right? So from that we got the existence constraint to be 1 here. And what about this? Here I got 0 because they said that a new department need not have any employees, right? So from the verbal description you are supposed to draw everything, right? In the exam they might give you this entire verbal description and then they'll ask you what is the cardinality, what is the participation, or what is the degree of it. Now this is all about this entity type and entity set representation. But coming to this ER diagrams, we are not going to use these sets, right? We use completely different representations. Generally, entities will be represented by rectangles and relationships will be represented by diamonds, right? So let us say this is the employee entity type and this is the department entity type and this is the works for relation, right? So one way to represent it is one popular way, or most of the cases we are going to represent it this way. See, we know that cardinality of employee is 1, right? And the cardinality, we know that so we know these two things. One, cardinality of employee is 1, which means the maximum number of relationships in which an entity of employee participate is 1, and the maximum number of relationships in which a department can participate is n. But when we are writing this, we will not write 1 and n here, we write n here and 1 here, okay? Even though department cardinality is 1 and employee cardinality is, here it is n and it is 1, we are going to write n here and 1 here, and we are not going to write anything here. Got it? So this is how it is represented. So what does it mean? Department to employee is 1:n ratio. The cardinality ratio from department to employee is 1:n. What does it mean? Department to employee is 1 to many function. It means that one department can have many employees, 1 to many, right? And what about the participation? The participation is department is not going to participate in a relationship, which means it is not guaranteed that every department is going to participate in a relationship, right? Why? New departments need not have any employees, but then every employee has to participate in a relationship because every employee should work for a department. In that case, we are going to write like this, right? So if it is total participation, we are going to use double lines, and if it is partial participation, we are going to use single line. What is partial? If some of the entities are not participating in the relationship, then it is called partial. This is called total participation. What is total participation? If all the entities of this set are participating in the relationship, then that is called total participation, right? And this representation is also called as cardinality ratio, single line, double line. Single line, double line representation of ER diagram. It is quite popular and used at many places. And one more representation which is also popular is this one. Without using single line, double line, we use the minimum maximum representation. The same ER diagram can be represented in other way like this. So one side we are going to have employee, and other side we are going to have department entity, and we are going to have a relationship, right? And this relationship is works for. Okay, now we are going to have within brackets on either sides what is minimum and what is maximum, right? So on one side I'm going to have minimum and maximum, right? So here, see this, what is the minimum participation of this minimum cardinality of employee? Every employee is going to participate in at least one relationship. I already told you, right? See, why? Because every employee is supposed to work for at least one department. That is what is given. Therefore, minimum cardinality is 1 here, right? And what about the minimum cardinality of department? Every department is supposed to have it may need not have any employee at all. Therefore, minimum cardinality is 0 here, right? And what about the maximum cardinality here? And every employee can work for only maximum of one department. Therefore, maximum number of relationships employee can participate is 1. What about department? A department can have many employees, so maximum number of relationships a department can participate is n, right? So this is called as minimum maximum representation, min max representation. Got it? And both are quite popular, so in exam they might give you anything, right? And this is easy to draw, but it can represent more information. Like sometimes what happens is this one can represent only partial or total, and this one can represent, if it is minimum, how many is minimum. For example, let us say an employee has to work for minimum 2 departments, right? Then we are going to represent 2 here. Got it? So sometimes in minimum maximum representation we can even represent more information compared to this single line double line representation, because if I have minimum cardinality ratio as, let us say, 2 and maximum cardinality ratio as n, or let us say n, right? Then what does it mean? It means that this particular entity has to participate in at least 2, right? Now if I represent this in terms of single line double line representation, even though the minimum number of participations is 2, it will still consider it as a total participation and it will just represent it using a double line. So more information can be represented using minimum maximum representation compared to this single line double line representation, but both are quite popular. Understood? This is one type of relationship which is actually 1 to n. So only confusing thing here is when you write this type of single line double line representation, even though the maximum participation or the cardinality of department is n, right, and the cardinality of employee is 1, while you write the numbers you write 1 here and n here, because it looks logical that way. See, employee to department is many to one relationship, isn't it? Many employees are related to one department, or department to employee is one to many relationship. Therefore, it will be easy for you to understand if you write that way. Even though this is the one who is participating in maximum 1 and maximum n, while we write the numbers we write it this way so that it will be easy for anyone to read it and understand it. Got it? Yeah, these are the important points. And degree is 2, right? Sometimes what happens is, along with this entity types, we even give the role name. In every relationship, every entity plays a role. For example, this employee entity plays a role of employee, and this department entity plays a role of employer, isn't it? Department is employing an employee. Therefore, you can even give it a role name, right? So role names are not very useful in case of this kind of relationships. Sometimes we have recursive relationships, which means a relationship will be defined on same set 2 times. In that case, the same set is going to act as 2 different roles. In that case, we are going to have role names. Okay, I'll take an example and I'll discuss about that, right? So just understand these things. It is enough for this example. We take more examples and see other points. Okay.